Once again, I feel compelled to talk to you about right-wing Star Trek fans. I know. I know. I don't like it any more than you do, but I have a few thoughts which I hope are worth sharing. And besides, every time I do a video or make a social media post swinging at right-wing Trekkies, a bunch of them feel compelled to comment or reply, which allows me to delete their comments and block them. And Jesus Christ, do I love doing that. The reason these shitty people and their shitty opinions about Star Trek are on my mind at the moment is the same reason it usually is. There's a new Star Trek show, and they hate it because it's got women and people of color in it. And as we all know, Gene Roddenberry himself explicitly banned women and people of color from Star Trek back in the 60s. This time around, there's what passes for an original wrinkle from these creatively bereft dipshits. They're also mad about the new Star Trek show having fat people and people who use eyeglasses. Here's a tweet from Captain Kett of the USS K-Hole himself, Elon Musk, commenting on a clip from the first episode of Star Trek Starfleet Academy, referring to the body types of some of the characters in the clip, as well as the fact that one of them uses eyeglasses. He says, quote, "Turns out they banned Ozempic and LASIK in the future, LOL." Just a hint there of the razor-sharp wit we are all free to enjoy now that comedy is legal. Here's another one commenting on the same clip by that smug, strutting little Nazi who should never have been let out of the last locker he was shoved into, Stephen Miller, who says, quote, "Tragic, but it's not too late for Paramount Plus to save the franchise. Step 1, reconcile with William Shatner and give him total creative control." I do have a larger point to make, but before I get to that, what a couple of dorks, right? Just whiny, dorky losers. "Oh, it's supposed to be the future. Why is she wearing glasses? Why are they fat? There won't be glasses in the future. There won't be fat people in the future." Shut the fuck up, nerd. You with your shitty sense of humor out here trying to make jokes. You with your pathetic, pedantic, shallow, and literalist poor excuse for media comprehension, thinking you made some scintillating point about a show you haven't even watched. Elon's probably still just sore the character who name-dropped him in the first season of Discovery turned out to be evil. Oh shit, spoiler alert. Sorry. And as for Stephen Miller's give Shatner total creative control comment, if we were talking about a human being with a heart and an imagination and an intelligent point of view concerning anything, in other words, if we weren't talking about Stephen Miller, I would assume this was a joke. Like he's saying, this looks so bad, their best option is to turn the whole thing over to William Shatner, the guy who made one of the worst movies in the whole franchise the last time he had creative control. Which, unlike most of the allegedly humorous things these fascist fuckwits say, is at least an actual joke, and not just hate speech presented as though it were a joke. But as others have pointed out, does Stephen Miller think William Shatner's Star Trek would be any more palatable to his narrow-minded and rabidly white supremacist sensibilities? Shatner has his issues, that's putting it mildly, but politically he's always been a pretty liberal guy, and I can't imagine he has anything good to say about Stephen Miller or Donald Trump or anything this administration is currently doing. Also, William Shatner is from Canada, which makes him an immigrant to the United States. Stephen Miller hates those. One of his most famous scenes in Star Trek was when he kissed Lieutenant Uhura, played by Nichelle Nichols, a black woman. Miscegenation! Stephen Miller hates that. And as far as the eyeglasses thing goes, James Kirk uses eyeglasses in Star Trek II. He receives a pair of reading glasses from Dr. McCoy as a birthday gift, and he uses them throughout the movie, and they also have a meaning in the film beyond their literal use as a reading aid. They symbolize the loss of Kirk's youth and his reluctant but necessary embrace of getting older, which is one of the main themes of the movie. Not that oblivious shitheads like Miller and Musk have much use for or awareness of, themes and subtext and all that gay academic shit. As far as some of the characters being fat, that reminds me of one of the early and equally inane objections to Star Trek: The Next Generation. Why is the captain bald? Haven't they cured baldness in the future? The best answer to that came from Gene Roddenberry himself. Like Shatner, Roddenberry had, to understate the matter somewhat, issues. But when he heard the complaints about Captain Picard being bald, his response was, sure, they can cure baldness in the future, but nobody cares. His idea was that in Star Trek's fictional future, humanity had gotten over its superficial bullshit and neurotic hang-ups, and most people just didn't give a shit about the stuff that preoccupies us in the vain and shallow present day. Why are there bald people in the future? Because people, at least some people, who start to go bald, don't worry about it. They're fine with it. Why are there fat people or people of any particular body type in the future? Same reason. They're comfortable with who they are and how they look. They're happy. They see no reason to change their appearance. They're good. I remind you, Musk and Miller and all the other nerdy little whiners who are pissing and moaning about this are reacting to a clip from a show they have not watched. They aren't responding to anything substantive about the characters or the story or any other aspect of the show. They just don't like that there are fat women on TV. And they think someone using eyeglasses in the future is wrong, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean in the context of a fictional fantasy show where everything is fucking made up to begin with. Actually, let me pause the political rant for a moment to make something clear. This new show, Star Trek Starfleet Academy, is excellent. I got a sneak peek of the first several episodes. Shout out to my buddies at the Trek Exploration podcast for inviting me on to talk about the show and sharing their screeners with me. And of the 5 episodes I had a chance to watch, the first 4 are all really, really good. I didn't like episode 5 very much at all, but I bet a lot of other people who watch it will like it a lot. Probably not Elon Musk and Stephen Miller, but who cares? Because A, nobody should care what they think about anything ever, and B, seriously, they're not going to watch it. I'm not doing individual episode reviews. My plan is to follow my recent standard practice for new shows and wait until I've seen the entire season and then do a video reviewing the whole thing. But in case you were curious, based on what I've seen of it, while I don't think it's perfect and I don't like everything about it, my overall opinion of the Starfleet Academy series is very positive. If you're not watching it, you should be. And if you don't want to pay for a Paramount Plus subscription in order to watch it, which I totally get, maybe you can borrow a copy from a friend sometime, if you know what I'm saying, and I think you do. Anyway, as I was saying, this might not occur to all of you because we are talking about a silly sci-fi show, but this stuff that Musk and Miller are saying in these tweets, this is Nazi shit. You and I, and most people who aren't raging genocidal bigots, might see fat people in a Star Trek show, and if it even occurs to us to take special notice of it at all, we might think there are fat people in the show because fat people have always existed. They're a part of humanity, and even if there are more effective methods to lose weight or change your body type in the future, not everyone uses them because humanity has finally realized that there's more than one healthy body type, and people are no longer judged on their appearance. What a utopian vision of the future. People like Elon Musk and Stephen Miller see the same thing and think this can't be a utopian future because if it was, fat people wouldn't exist. When you think the world would be a better place if certain types of people with certain fundamental and immutable characteristics, people of certain sizes, people with certain skin colors, people of certain gender identities, people from certain countries or cultures or religions, people with disabilities, neurodivergent people, etc., didn't exist? That's Nazi shit. Whenever I'm reminded that fucking Nazis like Stephen Miller and Elon Musk like Star Trek, there's always a moment where I'm knocked back to the first time I realized that fact, that initial bafflement, that question of what could these racist, misogynist, homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic assholes possibly enjoy about a show as unapologetically progressive and diverse and inclusive as Star Trek. It celebrates everything they hate. Why don't they hate it? I've theorized about this in previous videos, and I'm not going to rehash what I've said in the past here, But something new did occur to me recently, and it was inspired by something else Elon Musk said that's been making the rounds again on social media lately. He said that his goal is to make Starfleet Academy real, to turn Star Trek's fictional future into a reality, and create a new era for humanity where people explore the universe and visit strange new worlds. Only he was Elon Musk saying this, so he made it sound like a sad, pathetic little nerd fantasy instead of the greatest adventure imaginable because, and I can't stress this enough, he is an unimpressive dork who is bad at many things. But when I saw him say that, something clicked. One of the things that attracts people like Elon Musk and Stephen Miller to Star Trek is that they view Starfleet as a meritocracy. Right-wingers are obsessed with meritocracy because they always imagine that in a true, pure meritocracy, they would thrive. They really are the best and the brightest, the smartest, the hardest working, the most worthy. And if they haven't achieved their goals and realized their dreams and made their money, it's because all these other, less deserving people are being given help and handouts and unearned opportunities. In a real meritocracy, they would always be on top. As is nearly always the case, however, when it comes to the supposed meritocracy of Starfleet, Elon and Steven and the other members of the head-up-their-ass gang who think like this miss some important details. First, if Starfleet is a meritocracy, that is only because it exists in a fantasy version of the future where it is allowed to be because all the social and economic and cultural and political barriers that exist in our real present-day world, which make meritocracy an absurd impossibility, have been done away with. You can't have a true meritocracy in a society where people are unfairly judged and denied opportunities based on their race, their background, their disabilities, their gender identity, or other basic characteristics of who they are. Second, the biggest impediments to true meritocracy in the real world are bigots who bully and punish and seek to destroy those who are different and who fight to defend unjust systems from which they benefit. In other words, people who think like Elon Musk and Stephen Miller. They don't actually want a meritocracy. They want a system that puts them on top. That would not be a meritocracy, but they think it would be because, being narcissists, they assume that any system in which they succeed must be a meritocracy. And because, being bigots, they categorically define people from certain groups as inferior and assume that any success had by people from those supposedly inferior groups is due not to any merit of their own, but to them being unfairly elevated above more deserving people. When they see people they define as inferior serving on the bridge of a starship in Star Trek, it reflexively upsets them. And they don't even need to watch the show because in their minds, it's impossible for someone who looks like that to deserve the spot they have. A true meritocracy like Starfleet, to them, could not include such inferior people. It's just wrong. You know what, though? I've been wrong about something too, and I want to admit that now. In the past, when I've talked about the mystery of what conservative Trekkies see in a show that is so diametrically opposed to everything that they stand for, I've said that it's impressive, in a way, how they've been able to lay claim to a show that never represents their point of view. I realized, embarrassingly recently, how untrue that is. When the Elon Musks and Stephen Millers of the world watch Star Trek, they do see their point of view represented. It's there. And it's been there from the beginning. They can see themselves in the classic Trek episode Balance of Terror, in the character of Lieutenant Styles, who sees that Romulans look like Vulcans and immediately begins treating Spock as an enemy. He's so openly racist that Captain Kirk has to tell him to knock it off. They can see themselves in Commander Maddox from the Star Trek TNG episode The Measure of a Man, who denies the personhood of Data, and in Admiral Satie from the TNG episode The Drumhead, who uses her authority to promote conspiracy theories and suspicion and persecute people based on their backgrounds and their associates. They can see themselves in the Enterprise two-parter, Demons and Terra Prime, in the character of John Frederick Paxton, who leads an organization of xenophobic isolationists who want to see every alien forced off of planet Earth. They can see themselves in Star Trek Into Darkness, in the character of Admiral Marcus, who thinks the Federation has grown soft and weak and seeks to militarize Starfleet and start wars with neighboring powers. And hey, good for Peter Weller for finding his niche in the franchise. Maybe most of all, they can see themselves in Gul Dukat and the other representatives of the Cardassian Union on Deep Space Nine, because Gul Dukat is a genocidal fascist serving a genocidal fascist state. They can see themselves in all of these characters and more from throughout the entire history of Star Trek. They can, but they don't. And they won't. They won't because they lack comprehension skills, because they're so deeply lost in their own prejudices and biases that they can't tell the difference between what's actually in the show and what they're projecting onto it. And they won't because they share another trait in common with Gul Dukat, besides the fascism and the appetite for genocide. They're all utterly convinced that they are the heroes of the story. No wonder their Star Trek takes are all such shit. Watching a screen or looking in the mirror, these fucking numbskulls can't even recognize a villain when they see one.